Hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of Where the Fuck is Arcane? Or The Guy Doesn't Know How to Show Up for Hangouts, he says he's going to, episode 2. You might recall from Friday, we'd set up a Hangout and he elected to not show. So I showed a little bit of some of the audio recordings about Kent Hovind and talked a little bit. And then at 15 minutes, I said, bah, I'm done with this. I'm going to go do something else. And then some other people joined in. We ended up having quite a good conversation about related and unrelated topics. Today, seeing as I sent him the link a little over 20 minutes ago, 22, 23 minutes ago, and he still hasn't shown up or indicated to me that he's seen the links. He sort of already had his 15 minutes, so it's probably a pretty short hangout. I don't know. Let me give him 5 minutes, and then I will post the link to the comment section on this video and on my Google Plus page, and see if somebody wants to come in and just talk about whatever. And I'll probably keep it a fairly short hangout. I don't have any topics. So for now, what was the topic of this hangout to be? Just to catch people up who didn't see it, what ended up happening was we had set up this hangout for Friday, and there was some, I will say, politely, sort of being overly charitable to Arcane, there was some confusion over the start time, and he popped into the hangout briefly, and then he typed hello because I wasn't, I'd gone up to get a glass of water, and I got back, he'd come and gone, and so I sent him messages saying no, we're starting, 7 p.m. your time, 6 p.m. my time, we got this all worked out, and sent him messages, Google Plus, Hangouts, like just any way I could to send him messages to clear up the start time. And he just never showed up. And for some reason, I went back to the original thread we were having the discussion and replied there, because I know he gets his messages there. He was responding to those. And he just didn't respond. He just appeared to have shown up for this Hangout, and then left the Hangout noticing I was AFK, and then like threw his notebook computer out the window or something, because he was just gone off the internet. And during that, for those of you who had or hadn't seen the Hangout on Friday, I didn't make a point of saying, oh, he's a coward, he's a chicken, bark, 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 bark. I didn't do any of that bullshit that those guys do, because that's juvenile. That's juvenile. Even though I knew full well that he had multiple ways he had this messages. Plus, here's the other thing, is that if he actually was confident that he had something to contribute to a conversation about Kent Hovind, and in particular the evidence that was used, we'd agreed ahead of time. I'd put up notices about what the topic was. This wasn't be a personal attack thing or anything about Kent Hovind. It literally was, let's discuss their concerns about the evidence, how it was collected, how it was processed, how it was presented. Let's actually talk about what the foundations are for Hovind's 2006 conviction, and then now, of course, the 2015 conviction, and now the 2015 retrial on those matters that the jury was hung on. So he's got a retrial coming up. Let's talk about those things. If Arcane actually thought he had something useful or meaningful to say on that topic, and something that we planned a couple days ahead of time, then he would have blocked off that little bit of time in his life and says, I'm going to go do this Hangout on Friday night. I'm going to show up and I'm going to talk about this stuff. That when he showed up and realized, oh, well, HogTie's AFK, like what's going on, then he would have done something, right? If he was actually confident that he had something to say, he would have checked the event page or sent me a message or looked to see if I'd sent him a message or something. Not just like, oh, HogTie's not here, slams his computer shut, and that's it. Like he disappears from the internet for 2 hours. Like, come on. If he actually was confident that he had something to say, he would have made like a 1% effort to actually show up. So, and I knew this full well when I was doing the Hangout on Friday, but I still, without having heard from Arcane, like, maybe something happened. Like sometimes things happen in people's lives. He popped into the Hangout. He may have been fully intending to do it, and then something happened. Like, a neighbor had a medical emergency or something. He was driving a neighbor to the hospital. Like, I'm not going to call the guy a coward until I hear his side of the story. And even then, I probably won't, because, what's the point? So, again, I'm just going to talk for 4 more minutes, tops, and then I'm going to throw up the join link. Actually, sorry, I said I was going to talk for 5 minutes. I was going to throw up the Hangout link. So we're actually in the last 60 seconds of that. So get ready to join. You may have to open the all comments page and hit reload. I'll post the links here right away. Anyway, so I didn't call him a coward. But then here's the funny part is that he ends up coming out, was it Sunday or whatever day it was, a couple days later, he posts a comment to the video saying, oh, well, I came, but you know, you weren't there and you canceled it. So I replied to say, okay, so you posted a message to say that I canceled the Hangout. So in your view, I canceled the Hangout, but didn't know that I canceled the Hangout. So you had to post a comment to tell me that I canceled the Hangout, and you posted the comment to the Hangout as it's stored on YouTube. Clearly non-canceled, you know. I thought that was a little odd. And his response to that was, stop lying. And then that's it. So now we've had a 2-day debate on whether or not I'm lying about whether or not this Hangout had taken place on Friday, in spite of the fact that there's a YouTube video of the Hangout that happened on Friday. The same Hangout that he joined, right? There's some discussion about, because I'd started to hang out and realized a setup mistake I'd made, and you can't, in some of the steps, you can't go back. So you have to cancel the Hangout you've made and then start a new one. Me mentioning that, me being honest about the fact that I'd created a Hangout and then canceled it and then started another one, has created some confusion. Arcane seems to have taken the view that he joined the first Hangout and that I didn't tell him there was a second Hangout. That's not true. Nobody ever saw the first Hangout. I noticed a mistake right away, canceled it before anybody joined, removed the postings like within a minute, and then opened the second Hangout. Sent him an additional notice saying, by the way, if you get 2 notifications, it's not the first one, it's the second one. In fact, here is the link again. You'll see that I screen capped it in the message I put up here a couple days ago. And all right, he's fucked off again, big pussy. So let me go to my pre-prepared message. There you go. The link is now up on the in my Google Plus feed and in the comments section of this video. So if you reload the video or open the all comments page or whatever, you'll see a comment by me, and you're certainly welcome to come in and join. But anyway, here's the thing that I just find really weird about this, was that he can't just sort of do what a decent, sort of properly functioning human being would do and say, oops, I don't know what happened. Google's confusing, I don't know what happened. Time zones are confusing, I misunderstood. And say, well, do you want to do it another time? Again, if he thought he had something useful to say on this topic or any topic, then he would have made an effort to show up for this Hangout. But instead, he says, you're lying. And he just declares it. Like somehow he knows for a fact that I was lying. I never sent him any messages, right? And then he does this thing. I've noticed him do this in a few other messages. The I'm waiting thing, or go ahead, or take your time, or whatever. He'll demand proof for something in comments and say, they'll say like, well, you know, give me proof of transitional forms. Go. You know, okay, that's a great comment. And that's what he did this time. He says, give me proof that that you'd sent these 8 notifications. I went through in a post and I sort of tallied, like, yes, I'd sent him this notice and this notice and this notice and this notice. And I realized that he had at least 8 notifications. Now in setting up this Hangout, I actually realized it was 9 notifications because of additional step. When you announce the Hangout, you can include the person, and then when you actually open the Hangout, you can you also specify a person. So I put it in there, so it actually was 9 notifications. He says, well, you know, pardon me, you know, give me proof of that. And just then supper lands on the table. So I said, well, just, you know, hang on, I'm going to enter this guy's message real quick. And I really quickly screen capped, put up 3 pictures on my Google Plus feed to say, yeah, well, here's your evidence for it. And now go ahead and ignore it. I think that was even in my original comment. Go ahead and ignore it, because, you know, Arcane's fondness for demanding evidence and saying, okay, now go. You can rush to show him the evidence, and he's just going to somehow pretend that's not there. So that's what kind of left us. Now, he was leaving these comments today, and I said, well, let's you know, actually, sorry, his response, by the way, I should be honest with this too. His response to the evidence I've shown initially was dead air. He's got nothing to say about it. And then he later says, well, let's talk about it live. So I said, okay, we'll talk about it live. That's fine. And so I don't know if he was upset that we didn't do it last night or whatever. I have a life. I didn't just jump in and hang out. So I said, okay, we'll do it today. Do you want to do it on JD Kane's Talking Shit Tuesday, or do you want to do it right after? He says, no, I don't want to do it. I don't want to go into that JD Kane. No, guy's not fair. Can't have a fair conversation. I agree with him a little bit in the sense that there were already 10 people in the room, and Arcane comes in, and it gets to be kind of crazy, and he wanted to have a one-on-one, so I said, fine. And where the fuck is he? So anyway, I have once again sent him the link through multiple means, and he... here's what I didn't do, and then I'll open it up to some other people here. Here's what I didn't do. I didn't screen cap every step of setting up this Hangout. And he's going to turn around and say, oh, but he never told me about this Hangout. Because I don't fucking care. I literally do not care that Arcane says that I'm a liar about inviting me to these Hangouts. You know, I did last night. I threw together those little 3 pictures to show proof that, yes, I actually sent him these messages. I'm sure there's some explanation, you know, that it went to his spam because, you know, we're not in the circles or whatever, some fucking Google thing. I mean, Ozzy just had this happen where somebody told him that they sent him a message and he said, oh, I didn't see that message. And then he later looked and saw, oh, it actually was in my spam thing or something, through whatever means this guy sent the message. So Ozzy put up this explanation. Saying, oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. This guy actually did send me a message. I've now listened to the Hangout where these guys are talking about Ozzy saying he didn't get this message, where they respond to it as if Ozzy accused them of lying. So remember, in their minds, what happened was Jason Peterson had sent to Ozzy this message saying, hey, we're going to hold this Hangout. Ozzy didn't receive the message because it went to his spam folder. And then, as Jason Peterson retells the story, Ozzy says, you're a lying fucking cunt, because that's what Ozzy does, right? Like, you notice these guys, they can't just sort of chalk it up to a miscommunication or Google goofiness. It's everybody's lying, and everybody's accusing everybody of lying, and it's just madness. Look who we've got here. Present to everyone. We have, oh, no, I don't want to present that guy. He's not even in the broadcast. Stop presenting. Get my things here. Show is what I want to do. So we got a healthy group here. There we are. We have Jade and Fiona. Kevin, I think I'm somewhat familiar with. And we're going by Maximus this week, are we?
Well, sticking with Maximus because I have a blog of the same name and I want to converge my channel with the blog. And, of course, Epicurus, a Greek, has a bit of baggage with it, considering all the drama that went down, and I'm trying to cut myself away from that, so this is my new name and persona.
It was cuckoo. I understand. So who here is in BST time zone? Is it just Fiona? Like, we're after 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm just going to ask people to sort of give Fiona a little bit extra latitude if she has something to say, because I think it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and last I heard from Fiona, she was sort of pop in to say hi, but was gonna step out. So
yeah.
So give Fiona a little wider berth, and then we can talk about her after she leaves.
Don't worry, I wouldn't say anything behind Fiona's back that I wouldn't say to her face. That's up to my account. And in any case, are we still dishing about Arcane? Because I'm kind of curious why he isn't here right now, defending his cockamamie notion that there is no law that requires us to pay taxes. I was
about to sort of raise that as an issue that it's the magic sandwich. Sorry, I just saw the icon. So this is the magic sandwich sock. I'm going to show and broadcast.
It's the magic sandwich monster.
The magic sandwich sock. Okay. Yeah, I was going to raise it as an issue. Then I saw some other people come in, and I'm sure somebody was going to bring it up. Yeah, I mentioned this briefly on JD's show there that I'm getting increasingly fascinated with these people that say, well, there's no law that says I have to pay income tax. I'd heard of the Americans doing this, and then I eventually, when I was 18 or 19, I heard of this happening in Canada as well, with reference to this 1950s Supreme Court of Canada ruling that she says income tax is totally voluntary. And so I'd mentioned this as sort of, people remember if they saw J.D. Kane's thing here about an hour ago, I sort of made mention of this, but we didn't really talk about it too much. In the background of the side chat, fucking Maximus here, who I understand is Canadian, Eastern Canadian.
Oh yeah, we're over here on the, over from the American day.
Well, here when we say out east, we mean Ontario, which is really funny because you guys, you guys say, oh, out west. You refer to Ontario's out west. It's fucked up.
Well, if I might just use my Canadian accent. Well, I am out in the sense that I'm right here in Ontario.
Well, he ends up sending to me this link to, it's not just sort of a fact page about the Canadian taxation system. This is actually on it's a gc.ca website. It's CRA-ARC.gc.ca, which is the official Canada Revenue Agency website. And when you get things from that website, that's government policy, right? And there's a link on that page that addresses the issue about whether or not this 1950 court ruling means you have to pay taxes or not. And I can't believe my tax dollars go to pay some bureaucrat to write this article in English, et en français as well, to say, yes, you have to pay your taxes, you dumb fucking guy from Manitoba. Like, what has gone on in this country?
Whoa, I take offense to that.
Dear Manitoba.
Can I point out something about American here in the United States? Because I hear these people, these sovereign citizens and folks, and some of the anarchist types talking about how the income tax is illegal.
Sure.
We have an amendment to the Constitution making the income tax legal. I think it's the 17th Amendment. To get 16th, an amendment 16th. To the Constitution, is it the 15th? Okay, sorry, 15th.
No, 16th. 17th is the one that deals with direct election of senators. 16th Amendment is the one that deals with the legalization of the federal income tax.
No.
Well, I knew it was around there, but anyway, to make an amendment to the Constitution is extremely difficult. You have to have both houses of Congress agree, and how many of the states? What is it? 2/3, 3/4? But anyway, you have to have two-thirds of the states, I think. 2/3 of the states agree. Each state has to vote on the amendment before it becomes part of the Constitution. This isn't some casual law that Washington proposed. And income taxes actually go back way before the 16th Amendment. I get it confused, 16th, 17th. But so it's a 16th Amendment. But so income tax actually go back way before, but just to etch it into stone, so to speak, we passed a freaking amendment to the Constitution, so income tax is part of the Constitution of the United States. How they missed that, I don't really know.
Well, I've posted a link to the wiki page. I did a Google search for US tax law, and it just gave me the wiki page, which has the little section on the legal standing. And I put it in the side chat.
Well, let's approach it this way. We've got sort of cabals of 3 different nations here, with the UK folks sort of being the later time zone. Can we let's do it in that order? Let's do it UK and then Canada, and then we'll come back to the US, because I think that's really sort of where it's the most heated. And please, if people are watching this, like if Robert Arthur of the family Menard, whatever he calls himself, is watching, just here, send me a message. We'll get you in. Somebody please explain to us why you think that it's not legal. So we'll start with the UK folks, and ultimately we want to get to the point of something about Arcane said he would close his channel if in fact there was a federal law making mandatory payment of income tax. So we got 2 UK folks here. Is there a Freeman on the land thing going on there? And does your country have a federal tax mandate or mandatory system of income taxation? You don't know, you never looked into it. You just pay your fucking taxes, and you never for a second went, hey,
well, bear in mind that in the UK that taxation tends to be pretty direct. So unless you're a sole trader, then you pay your VAT because you buy your goods without VAT, and then you're
talking about sales tax. I'm talking about income tax.
But well,
you've never had a job.
It's a part of the same thing. You do pay these things if you're a sole trader. But if you're not a sole trader, if you work for a company, then it just comes out your wage packet as standard, as goes into the health system and all the other sorts of things. When you drive a car, the fuel duty comes out and goes straight to the government pot.
Well,
So,
let's go back to the employment thing. I don't think it's the case in the UK, and you're certainly welcome to correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that you actually pay your taxes off of your paychecks, right? So let's say you have a job, right? Cliff, you wash dishes in a prison or something, right?
I really hope Arcane does live up to his promise and shuts down his channel. That would be great.
Yeah.
Why? Then we'd lose all the lulls, man. That's so much funny material.
I mean, come on, yeah. In all fairness, there's a lot of really good content on that channel that we probably that it would be a shame to lose.
That's true. Everybody go to his channel. If all the videos, then we'll push him to shut down his channel.
Who's this now?
Arcane.
Boy, he's got to shut his channel down. Yeah.
Yeah. I've just checked it out. I mean, we do the pay as you earn business, so that it comes off before you even get your paycheck.
Right. But what I mean by that is that and it's sort of easiest to explain it sort of in the country I'm most familiar with is here, is that you're not actually paying taxes. You're remitting into a fund, like a savings account, essentially, a zero interest savings account. So for the taxation year 2014, actually this is a good day for this because it's actually taxes are due here in a couple days. So for the taxation year 2014, I will at the end of that calendar year have earned. I'm not going to lie. I'll let you guys know. I make $400,000 a year, but they're Canadian dollars, so I don't make that. Whatever. I make however much money as employment earnings, right? And from that, then on April 30th, the taxes are now due and payable on April 30th of 2015. They're actually 4 months after the calendar year end is when your taxes are actually due. But they don't collect the money for the taxes bang all in one shot. They collect it off of each paycheck throughout 2014. But there's a difference between paying your taxes, right? Like when a debt becomes payable versus when somebody is collecting money, a withholding. The difference between a withholding, money that is due for withholding versus money that is due and payable. So here, if I earn $1,000, my employer might give me $800 and then take $200 and put it into a savings account with the Receiver General of Canada in my name. And that's still considered paying me $1,000. I only get $800, but it goes there. That's not me paying taxes. That's somebody holding on to my money for me, so that come the end of April of 2015, when my 2014 taxes are now due and payable, there will already be an account there, with $5,000 that's my money. But then it turns out I fill out my tax return. It turns out I actually only had to pay $4,900 in tax, so they send me $100 back. That's what I mean by you're not really paying your taxes when you do remittances from your employment earnings. Is that an overly picky distinction? That's how you do it there in the UK, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it comes off with every paycheck. Taxes already, you're taxed at source.
That sounds to me so much more efficient than having to do this all at one time.
Well, that's how we do it here as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
It is efficient. You don't end up with a huge tax debt to suddenly be paid at the end of the tax year. If you're self-employed, etc., then yes, you do, and you have to do your tax returns.
Funny enough, Milton Friedman, who is considered to be the godfather of American conservative economics, himself suggested this to make the tax system more efficient. Taxes just come directly out of the paycheck. Mm-hmm. And frankly, I don't disagree with him, at least on that one. A lot of other things I disagree with him on, but not that particular issue.
Very, very quiet, Max.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, I was just saying that's something that Milton Friedman said that I agree with him on.
Yeah. Well, the reason I'm drawing that distinction is because in the U.S. there's a system of income tax for day laborers, which is quite a bit different than how we do it in other places. So again, I'm using the example of if I'm earning $1,000 per week and my employer gives me $800 and then takes $200 and gives it to the Receiver General, who holds it for me, so that at the end of that, come next April, when I have to pay whatever, $4,900 in tax, there's already $5,200 just sitting there for me. And in fact, the government has to send me a check. So you're paying all of your taxes at once on April 30th, but there's already a savings account for you there, so that it's sort of just taken care of, and then there's a balance due if you still owe money, or there's a refund due if not. Now, this is different for people in America who are day laborers because you actually can be taxed on a day-to-day basis. So you might earn, let's say you take a day job and you earn $50. Your employer would give you, your employer may have 10 people that are working at $50 a day to do some, landscaping or whatever, and he will say, okay, you get 50, you get 50, you get 50, and on like that. And then at the end of the day, he has to figure out, well, how much income tax would be due on that, and he might give each worker, $42.50 instead of $50, and that extra $7.50 would then be sent to the government. That's because for day laborers, taxes are due and payable at the end of the day. It's just like the way the IRS hangs out at casinos, so that the second you win money, they're right there to figure out how much their share is. So it's a little bit different there, but in any case, all three countries rely on a system of where you don't get to hold on to your money. Oh, and here's another thing too. Is this thing of when I say, well, you earn $1,000, so that means you get $800, and then $200 gets sent to the Receiver General on your behalf. If your employer gives you all $1,000 and doesn't put in the $200 to the Receiver General, that employer has broken the law. And sort of goes back to what Hovind's problem was. He was taking money to pay people, so he was just taking money out of his own bank account. Well, yeah, he was taking every time he went to the bank and took out $9,600 to pay people who were his employees. People say, well, he's taking his own money out of the bank account. No, as soon as you take that money out and you say this is money that's going for employees, that means some of that money is money that you're giving to your employees, and some of that money is money that is a withholding that needs to be sent to the government. And his purpose in taking out multiple $9,600 transactions was to avoid giving the government their money, so that he could keep that money in his own pocket. That's why it's fraud. That's why it's illegal to structure your transactions.
And I think the reason why he got such a high sentence was because he was uncooperative, and basically it's the equivalent of contempt of court. He told the government to go get lost.
Oh yeah, it's not my money; it's God's money. You don't owe tax on God's money.
Well, it was the machinations he went through. First of all, as Kevin says about it being God's money, God doesn't pay taxes, and then renouncing his citizenship and refusing to plead. He tried everything to avoid facing what he'd been doing, and he did everything he could to try and thwart every effort that they made. And then he tried to claim, didn't he try to claim ignorance at one point? Not quite understanding.
Yeah. There's an interesting thing that America seems to have, which is very much against paying taxes. And it's something in the UK that we pay an awful lot of tax, but then again, we kind of get an awful lot out of it, but often we don't realise it.
Well, how much? What percentage would you say you pay on taxes for your taxes?
Well, VAT, so the stuff the stuff you get added on. So sales tax, the American equivalent of sales tax, is 20%. It used to be 17.5%. So it's 20%. So you buy TV, it costs you 20% extra. Effectively.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's substantially more than where I'm living. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
We put fuel in the car. We are paying the equivalent of $7.5 to $8 a gallon US currency.
In the United States, I think that the reason why there's a dislike of taxes is because maybe a general distrust of the government, and B, there's also a bigger emphasis on individualism than maybe in certain European countries, and of course Canada. That's kind of what I would liken it to. I mean, I personally can see why a lot of Americans find anarcho capitalism and forms of libertarianism can be attractive, but I don't myself agree with the position. But I have defended those who do.
I think my first taste of the difference was watching an episode of Northern Exposure. Mm-hmm. So it's out in Alaska, in the sort of in a town in the middle of nowhere kind of thing, and one of the characters becomes the mayor, and she has this idea of hiring a dumpster because instead of having to drive 2 miles out of town, you know, and having to dump your garbage, you could just dump your garbage in a dumpster in the middle of town, and then once a month the council goes and takes it away and dumps it the 2 miles away in the landfill site. You know, and that'll make it easier for everybody. And she received an immense amount of hostility because there was this attitude of, you know, it's the thin end of the wedge. Once you start that wedge in there, you know, then you start adding all sorts of things, and, you know, it just becomes, you know, laborious. And they're doing too much. And, you know, so it's the small, what's it called? Small government compared to big government. So, you know, federal versus state,
but I think,
kind of thing.
I think a big point that has been brought up already is people don't know what their taxes go to. We have in this country right now a big infrastructure problem. We have cities that are literally falling apart. We have bridges that are barely staying up. One of the things I'm a Californian. I've been a Californian nearly all my life since I was like 6 weeks old. You know, taxes, it's expensive here in California. It's very expensive to live for a lot of reasons, including taxes. And I talk to people in other states who are, yeah, well, we don't have that income tax here. We don't have this, that, and the other thing. And I point out to them that we get a lot from our taxes that you know, people don't realize. For example, we have had 2 major earthquakes. And in both of those earthquakes, the amount of damage done was actually pretty slight. If you look at the rest of the world and you look at like a 6.0 earthquake, it just devastates villages. And you look at the earthquakes we had here in California, and yeah, there were some things, bad things that happened. The earthquake we had here in Loma Prieta, not far from my house, by the way, is the epicenter, caused part of the Bay Bridge to collapse and caused the big collapse of that one, crap, can't think of it, interchange. But it was also a very unusual earthquake. It was not like the usual pattern. And in the Northridge earthquake, most of the damage they found out was caused by some people who built buildings against the code. They'd paid off somebody, and they used substandard materials in those buildings. And the state went after everybody in the list. And I don't know if anybody ever went to jail or had to pay a fine for it, because it was long ago these buildings were built and they'd been owned by different people since. But I can tell you that the state made all of them show up in court, and they at least had to pay attorneys a lot of money. But our buildings don't fall down. Every single time we've had an earthquake, they've retrofitted every freaking bridge in the state. So when we have a major earthquake, our bridges don't fall down for the most part.
Yeah,
and our highways stay up, and our buildings stay up. We pay for this, you betcha. But there are other cities that are literally falling into dust because the people don't want to pay the taxes to support the city. And people complain about taxes here too, but see, they don't see that. It's like the old story of, you know, you hear about all the airplanes that crash, you never hear about all the airplanes that land safely. So here in California, you don't hear about all the buildings that burn down. You don't hear about all the buildings that fall down in earthquakes. You don't hear about all the bridges that collapse, because we keep them up.
Yeah. Well, the U.S. and Canada, and maybe even a little more so the U.K., are pretty famous for over-engineering things. There's infrastructure problems around the world and buildings that collapse. You know, the building codes work very differently. If you try to build stuff, like, people are like, oh, it's just crazy, like oh, all this stuff they make, all the hoops they make you jump through, but it is safer. But however, I mean, the materials don't last forever, and I think one of the problems in the U.S. is the aging infrastructure. I just added a comment to the video comments page, and again in my Google Plus feed, that says, and I hope I got the timestamp close to right, at 31 minutes, how do you pronounce your name in this version? Melagraphilis?
Okay, let's break it into two. Meleagris felis. Just remember the last part. Felis is cat.
Felis.
Right?
That's right,
Felis,
sure.
cat.
Meleagris felis, sure.
Meleagris is the genus of turkeys.
Oh,
so
that
it
makes
means
sense.
literally turkey cat.
Of
In
course it does.
the genus of turkeys and the genus of cat. So it's turkey cat. Yeah.
So the
Gobble,
comment
gobble,
is,
meow.
yeah.
Yeah,
At about 31
exactly,
minutes.
Cliff.
So the comment is at about 31 minutes, Meleagris felis talks about infrastructure issues in the U.S. Watch this video and shit yourself. And there's a link there to the Last Week Tonight episode with John Oliver. Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, the episode where he talks about infrastructure, and one of the most boring topics, like he's got some interesting stuff on there, and he's like, "I'll prepare to be bored with this infrastructure thing," but it's frightening. It's not boring. It's legitimately frightening when you watch that episode. So people should, your first chance, click on that and take a look at that.
Not long ago, well, relatively speaking, you know, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago. I'll have to look this up. But Chicago had a real serious problem because the river broke through a whole bunch of basements.
Oh, yep, I remember that.
You remember that?
That was.
Yeah, you're a Chicagoan, yeah.
Was that 90s? Because I remember my family.
I think so, yeah.
My family had really bad flooding in the 90s. I think it was 98 or 99. Like, our entire basement flooded. We lost a lot of stuff, and there was this big project after that called the Deep Tunnel Project.
Yes! And
it was basically a giant system of underground reservoirs to store all of the extra rainwater because Chicago's sewers were horribly outdated. It was a big problem.
And you have,
can we have some of that rainwater, please?
Yeah, really, because there are all these basements and underground tunnels and all these sorts of things. But the infrastructure
and the wonderful thing about it is because Chicago's up there and LA's down here, it should all go downhill.
Yeah, exactly. Down Route 66. Most of you, most of you listening to this will not get the joke, but yeah, down Route 66. What was it? I think was it Andy Warhol? I can't remember who once said that if you were to no, it wasn't it? It was anyway. You said that if you lifted up the United States on edge from the East Coast, all the kooks and crazies would roll down Route 66 into California. But I'll have to find that quote. I can't remember who exactly made it, but it's a pretty cool quote. Yeah, but the thing is, Chicago infrastructure is in really bad shape. And the river was literally breaking through people's basements and threatening to take out a lot of Chicago from underground. And that was really scary. I remember watching that on TV and going, holy fuck.
Yeah, I saw it happen live.
Yeah, I was going to say that must have been really scary because you were in Chicago.
Well, so we're drifting kind of far afield. I'm really inclined to not make this a very long hangout at all. Like I say, I did JD's thing, and I got other stuff I can do this evening. So I want to give it like 5 more minutes or so. If there is somebody, I mean, it's no fun having a bunch of people here that say, yeah, people should pay their taxes. You know, government should act responsibly, blah, blah, blah. Is there somebody around who is going to be able to express to us why, sorry, that you keep opening your mic, or there's some weird mic problem you're having there, driving me nuts. Why people think that there's no law that says you have to pay your taxes. Well, if there's somebody out there who can contribute to that, I'd love to hear it.
This is about Kent Hovind, right?
Well,
among others, yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things that with this has to do with the understanding of the 16th Amendment, like they brought up earlier, is that what it comes down to is when you have these people, look up anything on tax protesters, and they kind of give it kind of a breakdown there. But it's this this idea that when the 16th Amendment goes out to basically describe, the taxing of income, is that they think that because of when this was written and that it's an older document, that the term income only referred to gold, the currency that they had essentially at the time, is that everything was all currency could be related to gold, that's standard. But nowadays wages don't fall under what the definition of income was when they made the actual constitutional law. So that because they don't use the gold standard anymore, that can't fall under what we call income. So therefore, that doesn't need to be taxed. If
the gold standard people annoy me so much because they don't understand why we have fractional reserve banking and fiat currency in the first place, because you can't represent our economy, which can theoretically grow infinitely, with a finite resource.
Right. Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I can't argue for them, but I can at least, shed some light a little bit on what their understanding of the 16th Amendment is when it comes to U.S. constitutional law. But I mean, it has to do, like I said, it just that it's an old document. When they wrote it in, they said, oh, we're going to tax income. This is what they had in mind. What we have now as our wages is not considered income by what the founding fathers had wanted when they wrote the Constitution.
We'll see
I mean, it's worth pointing out the whole point of taxation in the first place was to pay for armies and things like that. The aristocracy and so on. So I wonder if, thanks to the whole independence kind of thing, maybe the idea of tax became abhorrent, the no taxation without representation thing. That's where it's kind of like, well, why should we be taxed? And that's almost a mantra in American history.
Yeah, it's steeped in wishful thinking. Again, I don't necessarily. I gotta say, I actually don't find the issue that interesting, because in this way, because if we're sit here and go, well, yeah, there are people who say that we shouldn't have to pay income tax, and now they probably have some reasons for it, but they're crazy. People got to pay their taxes. Then, okay, I think we sort of addressed that. And I don't think we're going to get anyone who's going to show and actually try to put voice to their, like I say, I think it's wishful thinking. I know Alex Botten has been, I don't know if he's kidding or not when he says, well, you should call up that Menard guy and do a hangout with him. He's actually got half a chance of showing up for one. So I kind of want to make this our last topic. And again, so part of the reason why I always announce when it's the last topic is sort of give people a little warm up that, yeah, we're going to be ending here shortly, and to give somebody else a chance. If you want to do a hangout, then let us know here, and then this way people know to go look for your channel, and certainly post a link to your hangout on this video so that people who are watching this now can go over and watch over there. I think the last topic that I sort of want to address here is because I've given my opinion. I just want to go back to where we started. I've given my opinion about Arcane and why he doesn't show up for shit. Like, what do you guys think? Like, I don't want to say he's a coward. Part of me does want to say it because, again, if he had anything useful to say, I mean, he's not scared of doing hangouts. That's the thing. He's not shy. It's not like he won't show up and do a hangout. But part of me thinks that he, it's a trolling thing. Like, he thinks like, oh, ha, ha, ha. I said I'd do a hangout, but now I'm not going to do the hangout. Ha, 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 ha. Okay, good one, Arcane. Whatever. I suppose if that's funny. But I think more so it's just that he knows he's got nothing. He's just got his wishful thinking that there shouldn't be tax laws and that Hovind's this terrible victim. And he knows that if he gets into a discussion about what evidence was brought forward to Hovind, that he's just going to have nothing. He's going to have bullshit that he read off of the free Hovind website, and he's going to be like Pillbox talking about pedophiles and talking about the judge was into porn or whatever else crazy shit he's going to talk about. Those are my two theories. Is partway it's
I do think it's diversionary. I think the not turning up is exactly like you said. It's diversionary. It's like, I don't want to talk about it, so I'm just going to make it out like you're a liar because that way it absolves me of me not turning up.
I mean,
I've got nothing to do.
The entire defense itself is basically, okay, you're right. If we're to take a look at tax laws now and what Kent Hovind did, he broke the law there. All the evidence points towards him breaking the law. So the only thing left to go after that point in time is, the tax laws are unconstitutional to begin with. So that's just the big bad government going after, a good God-fearing Christian.
I have something to say about that, but go ahead. Somebody else.
Thaddeus?
Oh,
Thaddeus
yes?
has been in and out with the mic. Oh, there we go. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, actually, Sokka kind of just brought up, which is exactly what I was going to say, is that I don't think it's too much about the whole tax problem. I think it's just the fact they're going after Kent Hovind himself. And since they know what Kent Hovind that stands for, they figure, oh, the government's going after him because he's a Christian and he knows all these different secrets and the conspiracy theories and all that. And I think that's everyone that defends him is defending him because of that. It has nothing to do with the whole tax thing. Like, trust me.
Sure. Well,
I
then,
come from the believers side of things, and that's how everyone around here is treating it.
yeah, but I just don't understand that. That to me, I mean, I get where they're coming from. It's sort of bad when you see, you know, somebody who's on your side, especially a prominent person, get kind of wrapped up. That is, can you mute when you're not on? So there's some weird connection thing you got going there. And I get that, like, but there's got to be a limit to it, right? Like, I mean, they always like to point out how Richard Dawkins, you know, is like a hero of ours, or our Pope, or whatever else, if you're a non-believer. I mean, if Richard Dawkins does something stupid, or he got caught for tax evasion, you're not going to go, damn it, you know, because you know that they're going to totally rub it in, right? But you don't then go and say, oh, well, he didn't really break the law, and oh, well, somebody who knew somebody who was loosely involved in the investigation turns out to be a pedophile, and I think the judge was in part of some illegal porn ring, and you just start crafting all these bullshit stories about how, you know, was I talking about, Dawkins is not really guilty of something. And that's what they do, right? They sit there, they can't talk about the evidence. In fact, they'll even go and say, well, he was convicted of taking his own money out of the bank account. He wasn't really convicted for tax evasion. So what the fuck are you talking about? Of course he was convicted of tax evasion. Like, that's the first 12 counts of the indictment. Like,
it's a photo negative straw man, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, so I just think that when you start talking to them about this stuff, and I say Pillbox and Arcane in particular, I think that they know that they didn't look into this at all. They see what's on the free Kent Hovind website. They'll want to talk about pedophiles and say, oh, well, if you think Kent Hovind broke tax laws, then you must be a pedophile supporter. You know, and you're just like, how do you connect those dots? Now, I know how they connect those dots, because there was one of the investigators who was involved in the investigation for like a day and a half or something. I mean, he submitted one document which was a warrant request or something, and then another document saying he was canceling the first one. He had literally zero involvement in the prosecution. He had no involvement at all. But they say the prosecutor was, you know, killed himself, was a pedophile. And you look, well, who was the prosecutor of this case? All the people involved in the prosecution were different people. This guy's not even involved. But they'll want to talk about that and say that you support him. But you know what? Even if the prosecutor on this case were a pedophile, you'd say, okay, well, I hope that didn't have like an impact on this person's job, and we have to go and look at these other cases and whatnot. Like, I mean, does this person, were they on the take, or were they doing something that? But the thing is, it's got nothing. The point is, how do you assess whether or not Hovind's guilty of breaking tax laws? You look at the evidence of Hovind breaking the tax laws. But no, they want to talk about these other things, and I just think that, yeah, when I mean, creationists, generally speaking, aren't shy about getting into an argument when they don't have any evidence, because they think they do. But in this case, I think they know, because these court documents are available to people, that all they're going on are these, you know, these bullshit stories about, like, especially when somebody says, well, do you realize Kent Hovind wasn't even convicted of tax evasion? They got him for taking out his own money. And you go, well, no, I can look. Here's the indictment. Here's the conviction. Here's the reasons for judgment. Here's the sentencing report. Like, it's all there. He was convicted of tax evasion. How can you say he wasn't? Like, what the fuck?
I tried to look up information on that myself, and I just said, like, I looked it up, and first thing that came up was, you know, of course you're gonna get like Kent Hovind's like official blog and everything, right? Yeah. And even I knew better than to just go in and look at that, because I knew it was going to be biased on his.
I know. I did. You know, like Wednesday, I started talking about this with Pillbox and then Arcane, and then when Friday rolled around, I remember thinking, okay, I'm actually going to wrap up work a little early on Friday and actually do a little bit of research in case either Pillbox or Arcane show up with some actual information, which I knew they wouldn't, but I thought, well, I'm at least going to have these tabs open so when they come in. And sure enough, yeah, you do a Google search for you know, you got pages and pages and pages and pages. It's like when you do, interestingly, if you do a search for the word vaccine, and you'll find like a 99-to-1 ratio of bullshit, you know, to good stuff. But if you do a search for the word inoculation, then you'll find like actual reliable things. But apparently now there's some truth filter or something, which I find a little weird. Like there's there's no Ministry of Truth, but instead there's no government Ministry of Truth. But the way people are talking about it, there's like the private corporation of truth, which I find a little weird. But anyway, yeah, when you do a search for Hovind and tax evasion evidence, anything like that, you just get pages and pages and pages of their bullshit. But you know what? I mean, these the courts keep records on these things. You just have to go to their website and download the reasons for judgment and whatnot.
I was just going to say, that's the first thing that comes up, so that's what kind of confused me, is so you look it up yourself and you're like, wait, that can't be right. I mean, like, this is what's showing up first, so it's like, really? So they were right the whole time? This is all big fraud?
Yeah.
That's what came up first when I searched it up.
Yeah, I would just like to say that, see, this fits into this whole mindset that we have right now here in the United States of how Christians are being persecuted everywhere.
Yeah.
Gay marriage is persecuting Christians. Gays are persecuting Christians. Atheists are the tiny number of atheists in this country are persecuting Christians. A country that is mostly Christian is somehow persecuting Christians. This fits into their mindset.
Sorry, actually, I need to take off, but I just want to address that one point, and it's not just the atheists or the secular movement or anything there. It's this entire movement of it's the Christian patriot movement that exists in the U.S. where they. Sorry, one second. My TV's a little loud in the background. I'm just going to step outside. But yeah, there's this entire Christian patriot movement that basically says that the U.S. was a Christian nation founded on Christian values, and that the country's been moving away from that for 200 years, and it's time for us to take that back. And it's this complete rewriting of history, rewriting of reinterpreting things like the Constitution and the original laws and all this other stuff to show, oh yeah, we are a Christian nation. We need to go back to that. And taxes is actually one of the things that they've brought into this as well.
Yeah, look at David Barton. And a lot of this comes from Rushdoony and Dominionism and that whole thing, for those of you who want to look it up. Yeah.
It's funny because I was actually on Hangout. Like, I don't usually do these at all, but because I'm just filling in for a friend that really likes to do these. You might know him. He's a Google Pluser, goes by the username of Keefees. But I was on a Hangout filling in for him, and they were basically talking about how it was like, I think it was like the Quiet Atheist show, and he's talking about how atheists are actually becoming more discriminated in America, and that it's like the Christians that are making all these different things about them. And we were just talking about how, even for me as like a believer standpoint, I don't necessarily agree with like half the things that my own religion's doing. So you got some of us that can still believe and don't necessarily agree with the whole right-winger attitude of things.
Well, and a lot of secular.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say a lot of secular movements and a lot of secular organizations were started by or are run by, at least in part, Christians. I grew up in a very religious atmosphere, but a very secular atmosphere. As my grandmother would point out, religion belongs in the home and the church, and not out in the streets scaring people.
Oh, the movement for separation of church and state, or more correctly, the barring governments from creating laws that serve to establish religion or whatever religious selection, religious rules, the Lemon Test, all this stuff. These are things that anyone who's of any faith, like any Christian, really should be fighting for. It's there to protect their faith and everybody else. It's the only really fair solution. And the only resistance I see to it in the U.S. is from the radical religious. They're the only ones who say, no, we should be entrenching religion and government. Like, you just don't see it from others. I was going to say that there's been an interesting hotbed lately, this topic about calling up a bakery and saying, can you make me a cake that says like fags are pedophiles? Like people phoning and asking for obscene, vulgar, hateful messages to be put on cakes, and then saying, when the baker doesn't do it, to then say, "Oh, there you see how they persecute Christians." Like, I'm sorry, you wanted a baker to put a hateful message on a cake and they wouldn't do it, and your perceived right to get somebody else to put hateful messages on cake is somehow, sorry, them not putting a hateful message on a cake is somehow anti-Christian. Because Christ would want you putting messages on cakes. That's exactly what Christ wanted you to do. That's what I was trying to say. So.
Yeah.
I've had a number of +1s on a comment I left on one of the right-wing blog videos, And it's Janet Porter saying about like marriage. You know, they're trying to redefine marriage, the gay agenda kind of thing. And I just left a comment saying I find it amusing how she's going on about redefining marriage while all the time redefining bigotry and calling it Christianity.
That's nice.
I saw that. And there's a difference between if you have a business and your business is making wedding cakes. According to civil rights legislation here in the United States, which ironically a number of our fundies here on YouTube seem to want to put back 50 years. Yeah. They literally want to go back 50 years to before the Civil Rights Act and discriminate against people. The way it works is very simple. If you have a business that serves the public, you must serve the public, all of the public. The only exceptions being if the public is behaving in a particular manner. If you have a heterosexual couple come in your store and they're pawing each other, you can ask them to leave. If you have someone who comes in half naked or dripping wet, you can ask them to leave. If someone asks you to put a hate message on something, you can say no. Yeah. There's a huge difference between simply doing your job, which is making a cake, or if you're a wedding cake specialist, making a wedding cake, and putting a hate message on something. There's a big difference. Yeah, now, I can understand, for example, a place saying, okay, we'll make your wedding cake, but because of our religion, we're not going to put 2 grooms on top. We'll make the beautiful cake, and you can go get the 2 grooms and put them on top. That wouldn't bother me. But to say, absolutely, we're not going to make a cake for you because you're gay, but that's your job. If you do not want to serve the public, do not support have that business.
Yeah. And it's funny because they get really offended when you point out the obvious thing, when you say, like, look, here's the thing, is that once you open your doors to the public, you're required to take your customers as they come. That is, actually, again, we don't want to, one thing I don't want to leave people with a mistaken impression that there's some sort of rule that says you have to serve everybody. Businesses put out signs, we reserve the right to refuse service, you know. I think a good starting place when people, if you're going to be on Google Plus or Facebook or whatever and engaging people on this topic, start by reading the wiki page on freedom to contract. So freedom to contract sort of functions in American society an awful lot like freedom of speech, and that is the presumption is that you are free. There isn't a list of things that you're allowed to say. The presumption is you're allowed to say it. And then you start working on certain exceptions. There are grounds for where there will be exceptions. Same thing, freedom to contract. You are free to enter into contracts with people or to just say, well, I don't want to enter into a contract with these people. But just like with freedom to speech, there are reasonable limits to those freedoms. And one of those, you know, so for example, with employment, you are not free to contract somebody to work for you for $1 an hour. In fact, you're not even allowed to be an employee. Like you're actually breaking the law if you're an employee and you take $1 an hour job. There are limitations, reasonable limitations on these freedoms. Now, that's not to say that this right to refuse a customer, so you open your doors to the public, right? You've got a bakery in downtown, your door is open to a public sidewalk, there's a city ordinance that says you have to take customers as they come. You can put up a sign, we have the right to refuse customer, whoever we choose. You can put up a sign that says no shirt, no shoes, no service, right? You still have that freedom. You don't have to have a good reason to, you're allowed to turn away customers with whim and caprice is the principle. Right? Just totally at whim, I'm going to turn away these customers. The restriction is that you don't need a good reason to turn people away, but you're not allowed to turn people away for an illegal reason. So if I opened a restaurant and I said, well, it's a jacket and tie restaurant, and then I was really picky and I said it has to be a green jacket and green tie restaurant, because that's what I think my customers want. I might go broke, but that's my choice to run a business that way.
Now, here's a question for you. When you say Thai, you're not talking Thailand, are you?
No. But you know what I mean. So I can make a. You can very capriciously.
That'd be really picky.
You could very capriciously say, well, I'm going to choose my customer base on some totally arbitrary, whimsical grounds, like they have to wear certain clothing or whatever. But once you start saying, I am not going to allow those customers in, and you're doing so on grounds that are protected in civil rights legislation because they're black, or they're pregnant or whatever else, whatever your civil rights legislation would be in your jurisdiction, that's when you run afoul of the law. So it's not that you have to have a good reason to turn people away. So you're not allowed to turn people away for an illegal reason. So anyway, I say you should read the freedom of contract thing. But then the thing that I find weird about it is that when you're having these conversations with people in these chats, and people always do this, they always bring up, they say, well, you're not free as a baker to say, well, I'm not going to make a cake for a mixed race, PU, a mixed race marriage, because in my religion I'm opposed to mixed race marriage. And you make that obvious connection. We don't bake cakes for black people, or I don't like doing photo shoots of mixed race weddings. These guys will immediately jump up and say, no, race is a different thing. And what they don't understand is there's only two things. There are grounds for protection and not grounds for protection, right? And they don't realize that if you're living in a jurisdiction where sexual orientation is civil rights protected grounds, then it rises to the level of race or age or whatever else is on the list. Marital, family status, religion, for example, and they for some reason really object to it. They think that as soon as somebody brings in the race thing, they're like, well, no, wait a second. I'm not saying that you should be allowed to turn people away because of their skin color. I'm just saying you should be able to turn people away because they're gay. That's not your choice to make at this point.
I mean, this is exactly the 1960s kind of mentality, isn't it? It's like, yeah, the same questions are being asked. The only difference is change the word gay to black and dial it back 40, 50 years.
Well, let me throw this, actually, a great example, because let me throw this out, because this is the most heinous comment I've read on this topic lately, was when somebody had put up a comment on Google Plus about this, people bitching because apparently gay people can't get a cake at a particular bakery, and they put up a comment like oh, well, so sorry to hear that this lesbian couple couldn't get this cake at this particular bakery. My African American aunt could have made it for these two ladies, but she was raped and lynched last night, and sort of in this theme of like, boy, listen to these homos just constantly complaining about, oh, I can't buy a cake in this bakery. When do you realize what they used to do to black people in this country? Like, get some sense of perspective. I mean, everybody knows. As
a lesbian who is going to be 65 in May, you know what they used to do to gay people in this country? You know what they still do to gay people in this country? I mean, shut the fuck up.
Yeah. It's a touchy topic, isn't it? And I'm only partly sorry for bringing it up. But brooming, your country has not just yours, others.
Yeah. But also, lately, there's a big fuss over Josh Feuerstein or Feuerstein, I'm not sure how you pronounce it.
Feuerstein.
That shouty evangelist, Feuerstein or whatever.
Oh, the guy who has horizontal stripes and vertical video.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's the one that looks like that dude off the King of Queens.
Yeah.
It kind of sounds like him too.
And not only that, made it into a Cite an Atheist video. That's impressive.
But there are so many ways you could pronounce that name, whether you're going to the original German or various anglicized variations. But anyway, he's the guy who
all of them seem to mean arsehole.
Yeah, exactly. In his case, they all say asshole. But so anyway, he made a phone call to a bakery wanting them to put a comment from the Bible about homosexuality is bad on the cake, and the bakery refused. Okay, and he's gotten in a lot of trouble for that. And there are all these people going, well, look how awful that is. Not only will this bakery in Florida not make his cake, but now people are attacking him for it. What they're missing, the part they're missing, if you've seen his video, he repeats the name of the bakery over and over and over again, and then tells people in the video to go after the bakery.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's why he's in trouble. He is in trouble from the government for doing that. Because you cannot do that. You cannot tell people to go attack someone. So that's why he's in trouble, not because, oh, they're going after a Christian again. No, the dumb fuck idiot repeatedly named the bakery and then told people to go attack them.
Yeah, it's funny.
The people who are in that bakery have had death threats.
Yeah.
Yes.
From Christians, of course. From Christians, of course.
Of course.
I'm sorry, from real Christians. When I first heard that,
because of course, there's this book that told them to do. Oh, wait a minute! Didn't the book tell them not to do things like that?
Yeah.
When I first heard that story, I thought, okay, well, Feuerstein's a dickhole. We knew that already. And it wasn't until I, on some other, I wasn't going to bother watching. I don't watch this shit. But then I'd seen the video, and I'm surprised he's on the phone with the lady for like 20 seconds because he didn't say, I'm a Christian and I'm making a Christian request, right? He said, "Oh, I want you to make this cake with this message on it." There was no reference to the Bible. I mean, it may have been sort of biblically motivated, but he didn't say, "I want you to put this Bible verse on." He didn't say, "I'm a Christian."
Oh yeah, he didn't say that.
No reference to this at all. He just wanted to put this hateful message on a cake. So, in terms of him saying, "Well, they're not giving Christians this protection, not giving Christians this service," no, he called and self-identified as a fucking bigot. So what he's looking for is fucking bigot civil rights, not Christian civil rights. So the Christians got no one to rally behind here because he didn't identify himself as a Christian. So I saw the video. He's on the phone with her for like 20 seconds. She did what was quite reasonable. She took it to be a crank call or prank call, depending what you call it, and she hung up on him politely. And that's the right thing to do. You don't shout at people. They give you right in the phone book. They always used to say, "Just hang up. Just hang up." So that's what she did. She hung up on him. And then he saw fit to read her name, first and last name, and the name and the location of the business. He said it repeatedly in the video, and he said, "I want you to call." Now, a lot of people are making hay out of the fact that he was in Arizona or someplace. She's in Florida where there's two-party consent. Sorry, it's not two-party consent. It's one-party consent or all-party consent. Florida is an all-party consent state.
What does that mean? I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, when you're recording, to record a call. So if you picture that there's a call with 5 people in it, like right now, right? There's
Gotcha.
So the issue is, can any one party unilaterally decide to record the call or to give consent to some other party to record the call, or does it require the consent of all parties? People call it two-party consent, but what it really means is if you're in an all-party consent state or jurisdiction, it means that if there's even one person in that call who didn't know that they were being recorded, then the person who made the recording is guilty of interception.
Right.
Right.
But
so in Canada,
for
example, it's interception of communication if somebody's recording the call and none of the parties know about it. Then that's interception of communication. If even one has given consent for it, even if the others haven't, then it's not illegal.
Which is interesting.
And here in California, everyone Hangouts don't count. That's a different situation. In California, everyone has to give consent.
So all-party consent, yeah.
But for example, if I'm in a Skype call with people, and Skype, this is where it gets a little complicated. If I'm in a Skype call with people and someone records that without my permission, they have just broken the law, and I could sue them in the state of California. Florida is a bit more complicated because I looked up Florida once, and it's a two-party state, I believe, but there are some exceptions, and I don't think Skype calls count. Florida but no, Florida has some kind of exceptions, little differences in their law that are complicated. And I looked it up a long time ago, and I don't remember, but it is an all-party state, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and what's strange about it too is it says that it's an offense. This is where it gets a little weird too, because they say it's an offense to intercept or record the communication unless you have all parties' consent, even if the person doing the recording is outside of Florida. That's a little weird when you can say that somebody who is not physically located in your state is guilty of an offense under that state's law, even when they're not really there. Well, how do they handle it? Are they going to hold an extradition hearing with the state of Arizona? I don't know.
No.
A lot of people.
No. What? Okay.
Well, it doesn't matter.
What I was just going to say is, the way it does is the person who's in the two-party state. Like somebody did that to me in California, and I was in a Skype call, and I objected strenuously to them recording it, and they put it out there, and maybe somebody edited or whatever. It doesn't make any difference if they're in a no-party state. It doesn't make any difference because I go by the laws of the state of California, and the federal government accepts that. What I would have to do is I would have to file against them here in California, and the whole thing would be handled over the phone. So they would have to call in to a court in California from wherever they are.
But the thing is, they're not.
And if I were to get a judgment,
they're not in the jurisdiction of state court of California, right? They're not. The person is not. Like suppose I recorded you. Suppose
they are though because they're talking to someone in California, so you are to a certain extent in the jurisdiction of California. So I could file against them, but I would have to file in my state, and I could get let's say if I were to sue them.
I'm going to go ahead and do this to you. I'm going to phone you up on just a conventional cell phone where there's no understanding that there's a recording. Now, I live in a jurisdiction that's a one-party consent jurisdiction, right? And I record you, right? And then you go ahead and you sue me, right? You send me, I'll give you an address for service in Edmonton, Alberta, and you go ahead and you send me that thing, and then we'll do the trial over the phone, and I will call your state court judge a fucking cunt on the phone because I don't care, right? I'm not in the jurisdiction of California in any sense.
Well, but you're not in the jurisdiction of the United States.
Right.
Yeah, but you're not in the jurisdiction of the United States. That's where it becomes complicated.
Somebody in Arizona is in the same thing. Now, the difference is you can sue in federal court if the two parties are different states. You can sue in federal court if the amount exceeds $75,000 or if they're different states. I don't remember how it works. It's a $75,000 cutoff or whatever. We're getting into sort of. It's not really. Yeah,
it depends on the state. But the thing is, if I were to get here's the thing. If I were to get a judgment against someone from another state in a California court and they didn't bother to call in or show up or whatever, the problem would be I would have the judgment in the California court, but the problem would be getting the money from the person in the other state. Can't think of the right terminology right now.
I would have to see.
And that would have to do. Right, and that would have to do partly with the Full Faith and Credit Act of the Constitution, whether it applies in this case, which means that each state must give full faith and credit to the laws of other states. But internet, stuff and phone gets very complicated. And you're right. Normally it goes by a federal law, but you can still sue in a state court.
Yeah.
So the question would be is whether the jurisdiction of the other person would, it would probably be up to me, not even to my court. It would probably be up to me to go to the jurisdiction in that other court and say, I have this, I have this judgment against this person for $5,000. I want you to serve it, and then they'd laugh their head off.
Yeah, I think maybe perhaps we're mixing up here. We're talking about slightly different things, and I think that maybe that's where I'm not taking your point, but I think I see it now. There's a difference between how things. See, I'm you were talking about civil cases, and that's my mistake there. The thing is, when you because something can be rendered criminal in one jurisdiction. And it doesn't matter. Actually, here's a really common example. A lot of municipalities make jaywalking illegal and then don't do anything to stop people from jaywalking. And the reason is just a matter of setting public policy, right? So if you're driving and I walk out in front of your car, violating this jaywalking rule, and you hit me in your car, and then I turn around and I sue you because you hit me with your car, no one's ever going to give me a jaywalking ticket. Right. Sometimes the police, when they investigate, actually, I saw a guy get hit by a bus back in '88, and when the cops showed up to investigate, they gave that guy a jaywalking ticket, which is pretty sad. Anyway, here's the point: a lot of times the law is there to say this sort of establishes social policy, so it helps create an environment where civil cases can be resolved more quickly, because then I sue you for hitting me with your car, but you would say, well, what I was doing was consistent with the laws, and what he was doing was inconsistent with the laws.
Right.
So even though I'm not going to be charged with jaywalking, the reasonableness of our actions would weigh very much more in your favor than in mine. And I think that, everybody kind of makes hay out of the fact that Feuerstein placed this call from Arizona into a state that's an all-party consent state that includes this weird thing that says, well, even if you're not in the state, it's still somehow an offense in this state, just to make clear that what he was doing was a violation of decent social policy. And I don't think it would matter how many states. I think even if it was legal for him to make that recording, the fact that he did something that was so foreseeable that it was injurious to her business. You put up a video on YouTube when you're getting 100,000 hits on a video on YouTube, and you put up a video where you say, here's this lady's name, here's the location of the bakery, I want you to call, and I want you to tell her that you're upset about this sort of thing. You're going to cripple that business for days. They might have to change the phone number. And I think what she should do is identify the owner of the bakery, that is. She should identify her losses. I don't think she should try to get him charged, because how's that going to work? He's in Arizona. She should identify her losses, and she should sue him for those, like send him a demand letter first, and she should sue him for the actual business losses and do it in file the District Court of Southern California. I think she's in Southern California, whichever. But yeah, she should
Florida.
just go. Yeah, I'm sorry, Florida, right?
Already would have tried that sue by now.
But sue in the district in the state. Sorry, sue in her local federal district court.
Right.
It doesn't matter that he doesn't live in the district. That's why you do it in federal court. It doesn't matter he doesn't live in the district.
Right.
And he's got the money to pay for it. Because remember, this is Josh Feuerstein. This is the same guy. If you follow Seth Andrews, The Thinking Atheist, there's him and who's the guy, the friendly atheist, that Helmet, what's his name?
Metzer.
Yeah.
Hemet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Both great guys. Only one. Anyway, so apparently Feuerstein has been asking for money to buy this Red One camera, which is like a $10,000 or $20,000 camera or some fucking thing.
Yeah, I think he raised $30,000 for it, and has gone and bought something for like $3,600 or something.
Yeah, he went out and bought a couple cheaper. He told people he bought cheaper cameras. He's still doing his dumbass videos, you know, in vertical video on a piece of shit cell phone, which I don't really object to. His videos are crappy anyway. But I mean, what is wrong with these evangelical nutters and their support a guy no matter what happens, right? Because that's a scam. That's a straight up scam. He's scamming them because he takes this money. Oh, I need a camera. He gets this pie in the sky camera he doesn't really need. He claims he needs this thing, raises this money, and then he's on Facebook being like, "Oh, check out my lovely jewelry," you know, and he's buying watches and shit, and he's just like, and then where's this camera? Like, and they don't care. If he didn't do this fundraiser tomorrow, they would send him.
You point that out is persecution.
Yeah.
But one of the complaints that some of the Christians are making is that apparently someone, not the bakery as far as I know, someone complained to the federal government about him attacking someone on the internet, and that he may be investigated for that. Maybe, but the thing is, technically, he may have broken federal law, but maybe not, because it's only one instance. You know, harassment has to be more than just what he did. But apparently, someone did contact the federal government, but nobody knows what the federal government did. Did somebody file a report and go, "Oh yeah, right," and just in the circular file? We don't know. But so some of them are making a big deal about, oh, but he's been reported to the federal government. The federal government's going to investigate him for this and da-da-da. No, anybody can file a freaking complaint. Doesn't mean it's going to go anywhere.
I think you're right about that. They got bigger fish to fry, and honestly, a guy who puts up one ill-advised YouTube video and then takes the video down with the immediate statements that, like, oh, I didn't realize this was going to happen, there's no chance they're going to get a conviction, because that requires that he understood and intended to do those things, and he's claiming he didn't know no judge or jury, or judge and jury combined, would ever convict him. However, I think the civil case has a little bit more, because the thing is, then they don't have to prove it at a civil case that he intended to do that. All they have to do is demonstrate that he had sort of a care to act reasonably, and a duty to act reasonably, and was being unreasonable by doing this. And then so she should be able to sue him for whatever, $50,000-$60,000, whatever. And then when it comes time for the award, say, well, I understand you got all this nice fancy fucking jewelry, so we can work something out.
Can I just mention something, a sort of taxation thing, which is an amusing one in the UK? So, as a cyclist, I get people, sort of jabbing their finger in my direction and saying, you don't pay road tax, because we have something here called vehicle excise duty. It's a car tax. It's an emissions-based tax. And in order to drive a car, you've got to have three things. You've got to have a license, you've got to have insurance. Sorry, it's four things, really. And it's not going to turn into the Spanish Inquisition sketch either. So you need a license, you need insurance, you need an MOT, which is like your vehicle's roadworthy certificate, and then you've got road tax, as it's colloquially called. And it, and the original idea from it, ironically, came from cyclists who wanted to ride in the countryside on the weekends in the turn of the 20th century, and it was all dusty and horrible because there was nothing more than dirt tracks, and railways had taken over everything. So you know, they basically paid for roads to be paved, and that's where tarmac kind of came in. And then, you know, sort of maybe 10, 15 years later, 20, 30 years later in some cases, the road lobbyists said they wanted the same thing for cars. So, but anyway, road tax in the UK generates £5 billion a year. But the Highways Agency, which is what does the like the interstates, the main big highways and the major A roads, everything outside of council land, effectively, that costs £6.5 billion. So it doesn't even pay for the motorways, basically. And unlike, I mean, I've been to America and I've travelled quite a lot. In all that time, I've actually seen roadworks twice. You go anywhere in the UK, you got roadworks all the time. Because although we have roadworks, which kind of slows things down sometimes, we have very good roads as a result of it. So, and that's where it comes from. It comes from the taxation from that. But the road tax thing just goes into a big pot of the treasury. It doesn't, you know, it's not sidelined for road repairs. It just goes to a big part of the treasury, and that goes, you know, in the same place where income tax and all the other taxes you pay, inheritance tax, you know, corporation tax, etc., etc. But the amusing thing about it is when I get someone who jabs their finger and says you don't pay road tax, no, I pay council tax, and council tax pays for road repairs, and my vehicle does 1,200 times less damage to the road than a car does. So far from me not paying my way, I'm subsidising motoring. Because, you know, every one cyclist during the rush hour is another person not in a car, adding to congestion. Cyclists tend to be healthier, so they're more wired when they get to work. They have less time off because they aren't sick, which means they cost less money on the health service system because they aren't sick as often, and so on. So it's the opposite way around, and yet there's this kind of, you know, because cars have to pay that tax and have to pay fuel tax and all sorts of other things, people do feel hard done by. And it's reasonable enough that, you know, it costs a lot of money to drive a car because, you know, 70% of the tax on fuel goes to the government, you know. So it's kind of ironic, really, when I hear these amusing little things about, oh, we're hard done by, you know, it's all unfair, and at the risk of doing a Robin Dupree read, I'm going to get out my persecution tissues.
Oh, jeez, I'm glad that's what it was.
So, do you have any bicycle licenses? Are there any places in the UK where you have bicycle licenses?
No, there's no such thing. I mean, to be honest, I would actually be very much in favour of having a mandatory, you know, teach all children to ride bicycles and ride bicycles on the road as well later on. Because even if they end up 15 and riding around like a lunatic, at least they're armed with the information to keep them safe for the future. You know.
Yeah, the presumption is you don't.
Well, I'd be against the bike license thing because I bike pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, nobody likes laws that apply to them. Okay. I had a funny observation. We gotta pull a plug on this.
Well, because I wanted to say, here in the United States, or at least here in California, I can't say for the rest of the United States, you may need a bicycle license to ride on the street, depending on what city. Because I grew up in the LA area, and in Long Beach, and you had to have a bicycle license, and you still have to have a bicycle license in LA.
Good thing I live all the way here in Canada, then.
But it's a local, you know, it's a local, not a state or anything.
I mean, there's something worth pointing out that pedestrians and cyclists have a right to use the road, but drivers have to get a license because they're vehicles that can kill people quite easily, you know. So you need to make sure people have the skills.
Yeah, well, the licensing isn't about road use, at least when it comes to the, well, I mean, here the provincial and then statewide in the U.S. The licensing is about operating a motor vehicle. I know this from looking at some of the laws here we have around traffic safety. The term highway is pretty much, I mean, we use highway to mean like, you know, Highway 66 or like these big freeways and stuff, but under the legal definition of it includes like laneways and, you know, back alleys and parking lots and whatnot. It's basically any place where vehicles would typically drive, as opposed to going four-wheel drive, off-roading, we say here, to go out in the bush and whatnot. So the issue is the license is operating a motor vehicle is the thing that you're being licensed to do, not operating a motor vehicle on a highway. You don't need a license to operate a motor vehicle elsewhere, but it's not sort of a road usage permit, right? Hey, I was going to ask you this real quick. Those, I noticed in a lot of those cycling videos, there'll be like there'll be the curb and then a straight painted line beside the curb, and then all of a sudden it'll go like the line goes like this and like this and like this and like this. There's a weird jiggity line alongside. What the fuck is that?
The zigzag ones.
The zigzag. Yeah. What the hell is that? Like,
generally it's a school zone or pedestrian crossing. So the school zones do not park ever here. And on the zigzag, it's always to the approach of a zebra crossing, a pedestrian crossing.
So what are you supposed to do when you see one? You're not supposed to park there? You're supposed to slow down?
Ever allowed to park on one of those.
It means no parking.
Yeah, but it's more than no parking. It's a no parking, they will shoot you, kind of. I mean, exaggeration, obviously, but, the thing about it is, if you park on double yellow lines, you shouldn't have parked there, okay? But it's kind of like it's a road offence. It's like a, they might. You get a ticket.
This is a tow-away situation, and you might not get your car back or something.
Yeah, no, it's more.
Because I guess what confused me is that you don't paint.
If you park on zigzag lines, and a pedestrian can't see around your car and they get run over, and they get killed, it's manslaughter. Effectively, you could theoretically be done for manslaughter because you shouldn't have parked there under any circumstances. The only time you're ever allowed to do it is if a police officer orders you to do so.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you why I was confused by that, because when it comes to like no parking or whatever, I'm unaccustomed to people painting very important instructions on the ground or on the asphalt. If it's that important, put up a sign beside it. We don't paint that information on the road on account of the snow, you see.
Yeah.
There we go. See, in the States, they have like blue painted curbs and red painted curbs. I'm like, what the fuck are you painting the curb for? Nobody can see that.
And when you said that, I was like, I don't know, why wouldn't you paint
on account
it on the
of the snow?
And then you said the snow, and then I remembered, oh wait, I live in California.
Yeah. In fact, the fire hydrants. Here's a little bit of trivia, and then I'm going to ask her. We got to do our little last vote. That I really do have to vote on this. Is the fire hydrants. Fire hydrants in this part of how far, anywhere north of Red Deer or whatever. Fire hydrant is knee high, maybe a little bit higher than knee high, and there's a band around it with a pole and a flag on it that's about 4 more feet above that. The only country I've ever seen where they actually put flags on top. The fire hydrants are bright yellow; you can't miss them. But then they put a band around it and they stick a big metal pole with a little metal flag on top of it, another 4 feet above it. And the reason is because when they clear the streets, they push all the snow off on the side of the road, and eventually the thing gets filled up with ice and snow from the road, and it's taller than the fire hydrants. And the next guy with a long blade that's clearing the snow actually has a chance of knocking the fire hydrant off the flange if he clips it. And of course, worse yet, what do we do when a building's on fire? Give the fire department a bunch of metal detectors to go on a treasure hunt to figure out where the fucking fire hydrants are. So we actually have these poles that stick out, and the firemen go up and they use an axe, because by then the snow would have settled in the ice and whatnot. You can't just shovel it out of the way, so they go out and they beat out of it with an axe to be able to get down to where the fire hydrants are. Which is why the trucks are always full of water too, because it often takes a fire truck 10 minutes to get to where they can actually unscrew the thing to get the thing out. And we do have fires in the winter, true enough. Anyway, so there's a little bit of trivia about Canada nobody gives a damn about. But yes, we don't paint our important information on the roads, and we do put flags on fire hydrants and make our signs an extra 2 feet taller than the rest of the world, because otherwise you can't see them. So
I'm reminded of an amazing photo, and it's probably a Photoshop one, but it just looks awesome. And it's one of those Meanwhile in Canada pictures. And it's basically like snow that's 20 foot tall or something like that. And you're sort of looking down on it, and it's just got this zigzag thing, and you can just about make there's a road in the middle of it. It's like, they must have had a 50-foot snow plow that's just created this wiggly wedge. through the middle.
Yeah. No, it's pretty nutty. Pretty nutty. So we're just about to wrap up now. Christian Anarchist, I've seen you in a couple of videos. Are you some sort of anti-government guy?
That would be true.
Oh, where the fuck were you? We're done. Like, started this an hour and a half ago. So, well, I'll be doing this again. This will be a topic we pick up again. I'll be happy to invite you to do another one of them if you are more lucid on the topic of whether or not there should be tax laws and that sort of thing than our motor mouth friend Arcane. Who? So that's just our last question here. Who? What's our thought on Arcane? So what was? I'd asked the question before, but I was the only one that answered. So why didn't he show? He's a troll and he's a pussy.
I think he just knows.
Yeah, I don't think he wants to be pinned down because he will actually have to come up with some information. It's much easier to just call people stupid in comments and things like that and say, oh, but Kent Hovind's a good Christian. Yeah, it's a lot easier to just make blanket statements and call people names and rather have to have a discussion where you must bring up some sort of information.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll try in the future to set up another hangout with him on a different topic. I mean, there are things that he's confident on. You know, I'm not saying he's a total coward. He certainly, chickened out on this topic because it's a loser topic for them. But there's other things he likes to talk about. I just kind of wanted to talk to him about something other than, hey, Arcane, why don't you run me through the pre-sup one more time, because that hasn't been done to death. But whatever, I'll talk to him again. I'm sure we'll find something else to talk about. Any last thoughts? And try to keep it to 20 seconds because I'm putting my finger on the big red button.
Well, the only last thing I wanted to say is I'd kind of put a quote in the chat up again about do not crucify mankind on a cross of gold. This whole business that Kevin brought up earlier about how some people are saying, well, the 16th Amendment doesn't count because back then we were being paid in gold. This whole thing about a standard, what kind of a standard, whether money is backed by metal, goes way back. And if you go back to 1896, what was that?
I was a child.
Anyway, if you go, oh, that's beautiful. If you go back to 1896 and read William Jennings Bryan's famous speech about crucifying mankind on a cross of gold, because back then they were arguing about whether to keep the gold standard or go to bimetallism. Oh my God, not bimetallism. So, the currency has changed over the years, and if you're going to get that stupid picky about, oh, there's no more gold,
your 20 seconds
it's utterly ridiculous. Yeah.
Okay. Who else got something?
What she's saying is back then it was fundamentalism.
That's a great photo. Who put that up? Who has that? That was yours?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I'm actually being called upstairs, so I actually need to end, even though I offered people a last chance to speak. I apologize to Simon and Thaddeus and Christian Anarchist, but I am just going to pull the plug because I got to run upstairs. But we'll do it again. I'll keep you guys on my invite list, and we'll have you around again. So.
Thanks very much.
All right, everyone, take care and have a good night.
Thank you.